The first category of transformations is row transformations. These row transformations work on data row by row by row by row. First one is character map. This applies string functions, such as case conversion to character data in string type columns. Copy column creates new columns by copying input columns and adding new columns to the transformation output. Data conversion. This converts the data in an input column to a different data type or length and then copies it to a new output column. This is really handy if you're reading data from one relational table and going to ultimately put it in another relational table, but the data types are different. So you can use data conversion to get the data in the right format. Derived column creates a new column and adds values by applying integration services expressions to transform input columns. This transformation allows you to use expressions to perform tasks like merging two columns of data into one. This transform has a lot of possibilities for use and is quite powerful, particularly because you have the full power of integration services expressions at your disposal. The OnlyDB command runs a SQL statement for each row in the data flow. For example, you can use the OnlyDB command to perform updates on each row in the data flow pipeline. And then there's a script component. This hosts scripts and enables a package to include and run custom script code. This is easily the most powerful transformation at your disposal because you can write full .NET code to transform data. The next category of transformations are the row set transformations. These row set transformations work on sets of rows, sometimes perform an aggregation of some type. An important thing to understand about these transformations is that some transformations are asynchronous. Sort and aggregate are a couple examples. This means that the data moves into that particular transformation in a set or as a set, rather than row by row until the transformation has all of the data, and then it can perform whatever its action is. But it means that the transformation is blocked until it's complete, which could cause performance issues. But then other transformations are not asynchronous. So consider that when you create data flows, because it can affect in a big way the performance of your package. All right, so the first one is aggregate. This applies various aggregate functions like average or sum to column values. And this is an asynchronous transformation because it needs all of the values in order to compute the aggregate. And then sort sorts the input on one or more columns. This is an asynchronous transformation. So it blocks. It needs all of the data in order to know what order to put it in before it can send it down the pipeline. And then there's pivot and unpivot. These creates or converts from a crosstab or matrix view of relational data. And these are also asynchronous transformations. Then there's also percentage sampling. This creates a sample data set by selecting a percentage of the transformation input rows. It's very handy sometimes to just get a representative sample of the data. And then there's also row sampling, which obtains a randomly selected subset of an input data based on a seed value. So I think with these transformations, you really start to get a feel for how much power there is in these transformations, the kind of things that you can do. You can really slice and dice and chop up the data in a lot of flexible ways. Okay, then there's split and join transformations. These work with data row by row to split or join different data flows. So here is where you can split off data into multiple data flows or join multiple data flows together. So you can process subsets of the data, filter the data in various ways, process them in different ways, and then bring them back together. Or just put the different flows into different destinations. Again, a lot of flexibility. So the first one here is multicast. This redirects an input data stream to multiple output data streams. So it's kind of similar to a case statement in Transact SQL. Conditional split redirects an input data stream to multiple output data streams depending on the expression that you set. The default path catches any rows that explicit expressions don't. So you can have an expression that catches various types of conditions within your data flow, as well as a default that doesn't meet any of the expressions that you define. Very, very flexible. Union all It's a lot like the union all within Transact SQL. It combines multiple inputs into one output. And this is an asynchronous transformation. Merge join creates an output by joining two sorted data sets using a full, left, or inner join. So merge join is an asynchronous transformation. And then there's merge that merges two sorted sources of data. And then there's lookup. So it joins data in input columns with columns in a reference data set. So it's just like a lookup that you might do within a select statement that joins different tables together. All right, then there are a few business intelligence transformations. These are specifically designed for BI needs, doing things like creating a dimensional database in a data warehouse. And they work with analysis services data. So just briefly, the transformations available are fuzzy grouping, which groups similar data rows based on fuzzy matching, fuzzy lookup, that looks up values in a reference data set based on fuzzy matching rather than precise matches. There's term extraction, which extracts terms from a column for word and frequency analysis. Term lookup, which is similar to term extraction. It counts the terms in a table as listed in a lookup reference table. There's a data mining query that executes a DMX language prediction query against a data mining model. And then also a slowly changing dimension transformation. And this coordinates the update and insertion of records in dimension tables for a dimensional database. This is very useful for data warehousing. Now, one note about these transformations is that most of them are available only in the Enterprise Edition of SQL Server, which means they're also in the Developer Edition. But if you're using these in a production environment, you'll need the Enterprise Edition of SQL Server. All right, then there's a catch-all category for transformations, other transformations. These just covers all of the other transformations that have useful applications for transfer data, but don't easily fit into other categories. So one is audit. This adds data about the environment in which the package is running. And this is an asynchronous transformation. Cache writes data from a connected data source in the data flow to a cache connection manager for later use with lookups. It's a way of improving the performance of doing lookups within a data flow. Export column reads data in a data flow and inserts blob or binary large object data into a file. Import column reads data from files and adds the data to columns in a data flow. So that's going to be very flexible if you have some additional data that you need to add to the data flow pipeline that's stored in files someplace. And then there's row count, which counts the rows as they pass through a data flow and stores the final count in a variable. And this is an excellent technique to use for debugging.